I'm going to share with you the 3 blunders you make in trying to discern spiritual guidance. Haven't we all faced the question, haven't you faced the question, is this God's guidance or where is this guidance coming from? That's a great question. The fact that you're sincerely asking that question is the right mind space to be in, to really want to allow spiritual guidance to flow through you, to sincerely want that. That, my friend, is the right place. And one thing that's helped me in discerning spiritual guidance is just knowing that when you're willing, that's enough to allow spiritual guidance to guide you. Even when you make what seems like a wrong decision, because I'm sure there's fear about, well, what's the right path I'm supposed to take? I'm afraid of making the wrong decision. What if this isn't spiritual guidance? And so I want to tell you, when you're willing to make that choice, you're going to make the choice. You're going to be guided. And even if it's the wrong decision, so to speak, there really is no wrong decision. You can't ultimately go wrong because you're going to learn from the experience. You're going to learn. And when you learn, you're going to be at a higher consciousness. Then you can make a different choice, a different decision. You see? So that should help you right from the get-go to not be afraid. See, that's your number 1 blunder, is afraid of making the wrong choice. Afraid of making the wrong choice. Don't worry about the fear. Be willing to let God express through you, willing to follow your divine guidance. And this is where the ego comes in, right? Because the ego is, I want it the way I want it, right? Not thy will, but my will be done, Lord. So that's the blunder people make, is they listen to their ego. Their ego. Now, the great sage Yogananda talked about the 4 aspects of consciousness. One is the intellect, or the mind, the mind. The mind, I want to use the analogy that he did. Imagine you're looking at a reflection of a horse in water, right? You're looking at the reflection. Your mind registers what it is purely. Your senses take it in and you see the shape of a horse, right? It just reflects purely in your mind. They call that mon, F-O-M-O-N. That's a Sanskrit for the mind. And then next comes your intellect, which is bodhi, B-O-D-I. The intellect divides things up, see? The intellect sees it and goes, oh, it's a horse. It's a horse. It instead of just registering it as the reflection, now it divides it up, it analyzes it, says it's a horse. So far, there's no problem. Then comes the ego, called ahankara in the Sanskrit, A-H-A-N-K-A-R-A. That's the ego. That's when there's an identification with what you're seeing. So in this case, the horse. This is my horse, right? Your ego's identifying it. He said that the ego is the identification with your body or your personality. The ego is looking at the reflection of the horse and going, that's my horse. Now, that's not a problem. There's nothing wrong with that identity. It may, in fact, be your horse. You have to take care of the horse. It's your horse. Just like it might be your spouse, your partner, it might be your job, it might be some other thing that you're responsible for. Indeed, it is yours. So far, there's no problem. Your mind registered it, your intellect figured out what it was, and your ego said, that's my horse. Now, the 4th part of consciousness is where the heart's feelings come in, called chitta, C-H-I-T-T-A in the Sanskrit, where now you have emotion about what you're seeing. It's personalized emotion. I'm so happy when I see my horse. So see, now it's not just a horse that I'm responsible for. Now I'm involved in it. I'm happy because of my horse. I love my horse. Now, if something happens to your horse, what's going to happen to your feelings? What's going to happen to you? You know, how the fact that it touches you emotionally somehow, your judgment is not totally impartial now, right? Now it's maybe it's a beautiful horse, my beautiful horse. Or maybe it's my old horse. Maybe it's a tired horse and I need to get a different horse. You see? Or my horse is better than other people's horses. Now the ego's involved. That's the error that we make with guidance. The blunder that you make is letting fear and letting the ego get involved and not being impartial. See, when we start to go, oh Lord, please tell me what I should do, but you're not impartial about it. You want a certain result. You know, should I get married or shouldn't I get married? Should I go out with that person or shouldn't I? But please God, let it be this one. Let it be what I want. We may not even consciously realize that's what we're doing. And that's a big blunder because spiritual guidance is calm. It's quiet. Spirit really doesn't care what you do ultimately, really. And Spirit's not going to dominate your consciousness. So when you pray for guidance, you got to be impartial. You got to be open to what does Spirit want to do through me? What is for the highest and best of my soul? Not, this is what I want, dear Lord, please make it so. You see the difference? That's a big blunder because now you're going to do what you want to do. I remember I had a friend many years ago who I actually was attracted to. I was hoping she'd be interested in me. And we went to a movie one time, and as we were driving in the car, you know, for me it was like we were going on a date. As we were driving in the car, she suddenly told me, she said, Justin, she knew I was a minister. What do you think about the fact that I want to move in with so-and-so? Some guy that we both knew. Well, geez, I had to put on my listening cap and try to be impartial and really reflect back to her what she was saying, what was on her mind. You see, I had to put aside what I wanted, which was, gee, I was hoping we might get together, that, you know, this was like a date. Well, she had a different point of view. So you see how I had to be impartial there? But not only that, as she shared with me, what I heard is she's talked to different people she knew, some very wise people, and they all cautioned her about moving in with this guy. They knew both of them. And they cautioned her. They didn't really think that was a wise move for her. But she wanted what she wanted, right? She wasn't impartial. She was asking people, but really she wanted what she wanted. At least that's how it appeared. And it didn't work out too well. So that's what happens when we want what we want, rather than really being impartial and saying, Lord, not my will thine be done. Being open to the different options, you know? You got to be open. One person was like, they wanted to succeed in a certain field, but in order to be in that field, they had to be willing to move. Were they willing to move? Were they willing to do whatever was necessary? That's the place that we need to be in. Lord, here are the options. I'm open to whatever you're guiding me to do. That's all I want. I want to do what my higher self, whatever is the right move to do. That doesn't mean you don't have desires. It doesn't mean you don't notice your preference. But what that means is I'm open. It doesn't have to be my way. I don't have to make God say, yes, that's what I want. No, I'm impartial. I'm willing. So that's the first blunder, is looking at your ego, looking at your likes and dislikes and following those instead of being impartial and open and willing to do whatever Spirit guides you to do. Now, from that place, you're safe to start tuning in to, well, what is God guiding me through my thoughts, through my desires, and through my inner feeling of rightness, through an inner feeling of yes or hesitation, a no feeling. Now you're in the right place. The second blunder you make in discerning spiritual guidance is turning to psychics for your guidance. Okay, I'm not saying there's something that it's wrong to do that, but I'm saying don't turn over your guidance to somebody else. Because here's the thing. Psychics, there's been studies done where they followed the results that psychics predict, right? We all know about people who make predictions about the future, about who's going to become president and who's going to, this and that's going to happen, right? We've heard all those famous psychics who do that. Here's what they discovered. A lot of them are no more accurate than if you asked a child what you thought was going to happen. But here's what a lot of them do. They make so many predictions that they're bound to be right about something. And then when they're right about something, they hold that up and say, see, I was right about that. They don't talk about 98, 99% of the things they were wrong about. You see, you got to use good judgment. You got to use discernment when you're talking to psychics because they're not all the real deal. You know, that's, I think, very rare to find someone who really is tuned in. They make a lot of predictions. They're going to be right about something. You got to be very careful about that. And there are psychics who want you to become dependent on them. They want you to learn to rely on them. There are people who get so attached to psychics, whatever you want to call them, a medium, a psychic, intuitive, I don't care what fancy name we call it. There are a lot of them who want you to rely on them. And some people become so dependent on somebody else that they go to them for everything. You know, what should I wear tomorrow? Well, I'm being a little sarcastic, but you know, they want to go to them about every little detail. A real psychic, a real person who's tuned in, they want you to learn how to tune into your own guidance. See, that's empowerment. They want you to learn how to develop your own intuition. They want you to learn how to discern what's true for you, not become dependent on them. So be careful about relying on psychics. Ultimately, we're here to rely on ourselves. As yoga philosophy has said, you got to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. You got to learn how to read your own inner guidance. You got to learn how to listen to your own guidance. So that's error number 2, is making the mistake of relying on a psychic. You got to be very careful of who you listen to, but ultimately, as one of the presidents says, the buck stops with me. The buck stops with you. You got to learn how to know what's right for you, because there are plenty of people who will tell you what they think is right for you, but ultimately the buck stops with you. You got to decide. You got to know what's right for you. You can hear what someone has to say and go, well, that's interesting. Maybe it'll validate what you feel inside yourself. Maybe that's how I look at it. Let it be a validation of what you already know inside yourself, what you already feel. But certainly don't completely rely on what somebody else says. I'll tell you what, you can experience a lot of confusion when you go to somebody and think they have the answers for you, because you may feel different than what they're telling you. And then you're like, well, maybe they're more in tune with God than I am. Guess what? You are as much an expression of God as anybody else on the planet. There are other people more tuned in maybe, but you are here to develop and become attuned for yourself. You got to learn how to develop that attunement for yourself. So maybe listen if you use good judgment about consulting a psychic, but remember, it's got to feel right inside you. You got to learn to trust the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God inside of you. The third blunder that people make is looking to signs, right? Looking outside for some kind of sign and taking it too seriously, right? I read a story many years ago. This guy wanted to know whether he prayed to God, should I marry this girl or not? Should I propose to her or not? And he lived in a city area, somewhere out in Washington, D.C. And he prayed, Lord, show me a sign about whether I should marry this woman or not. Well, guess what? He was driving on the interstate in Washington, D.C., or a highway, and he saw a deer, like right off the highway. It was a deer that shouldn't be where it was. And he thought, that's the sign. I should marry this girl. So he proposed to her. Guess what? She was not interested. It wasn't the sign. That wasn't the sign. That was just a freaky thing that happened. Lots of freaky stuff happens. We've had foxes show up in Manhattan here, and all kinds of things like that happen in life. So I would encourage you not to give a lot of credence to, Lord, show me a sign. Make sure that, you can observe outer things. I think things do happen in the outer world. Doors close and doors open. A closed door doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't go that route. If you still feel the passion, the desire, it feels like it's right for you to continue to pursue that route, then a closed door doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't keep knocking or go around the door or the mountain, whatever the blockage is. You have to discern that for yourself. But I wouldn't put a lot of credence on signs. I think, pay attention, and sometimes you'll see synchronicities. And if there's a bunch of things that are pointing in a certain direction, that's a good indication. But proceed with caution. Proceed with continuing to check in within yourself. Notice the things. I remember when I was after college, I was thinking about, okay, what's the next step? And I thought of going to the sports psychology program at the University of Virginia. That was a long time ago. That was before sports psychology was as popular as it is today. This was when it was new. And I was going to apply at the University of Virginia because there was a famous golf psychologist there. He worked with golfers, and I was a golfer. And so I was praying about it, and I kept seeing University of Virginia license plates everywhere. And I thought, well, maybe that's a sign. Well, it turns out it wasn't a sign. Okay? It just wasn't. So don't make the mistake of asking God and then looking for some sign that is going to be the answer. I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying don't look at signs at all, but check in with your heart. Check in. Does it feel right when you get still and calm, when you're impartial, as we talked about? Does it feel right? And does it look like that's the thing that you're supposed to do? Are the signs supporting it? Are you talking to wise people who are sort of affirming and saying, I think that is a good direction for you to go? Or, well, maybe I think you need to reconsider this thing that you're choosing to do. Those are all parts of the things to consider. But don't just ask and then some sign shows up and you're like, that's the thing I should do. And you run for you ride off for the sunset. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Okay? So that's the third blunder you make. Number one, relying on your ego, coming from your ego instead of being impartial. 2, looking and relying on psychics too much. And 3, relying on signs that may have nothing to do with it. There have been people who, they're going to go into town and they stub their toe on the couch and they're like, oh, that's a sign, shouldn't go into town. Maybe it's a sign you need to pay attention where you're walking. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So I'm going to share one additional bonus with you of how you make blunders in following divine guidance. And that is being too superstitious. We know about people who, if they knock the salt shaker over, they feel like they got to throw salt over their left shoulder to ward off evil spirits. That's called superstition, right? You don't want to be caught up into superstition, right? You don't want to get caught up in that kind of stuff. And you want to really tune into the Spirit of God inside of you, not get caught up in this external stuff that has nothing to do with your inner guidance, you know? And don't let your subconscious guide you, you know, because that's part of this whole challenge is when you get still and quiet to open up to spiritual guidance, you can have images and hallucinations and stuff like that that aren't your guidance. They're coming from your subconscious, right? You don't want to, when you ask for guidance, we want to do so with energy. We want to do so with alertness. We don't want to get so passive that our subconscious mind starts to influence us and we start to see stuff that's not really guidance. Like this one person was sharing that he saw Jesus appeared to him, and he was, well, what did Jesus do? He said, oh, we sat down and smoked a cigarette together. Why would Jesus come just to smoke a cigarette? Oh, because, you know, he just wanted to hang out, and, you know, that's how Jesus is. You know what? Jesus is a very evolved, high-level being. He's not going to show up just to have a cigarette with someone. If he's going to show up, it's going to be with meaning and purpose of a higher order. So don't, you know, you gotta question things, superstitions and stuff also that shows up from your subconscious mind. So don't make these 3 blunders plus the 4th. Learn to tune in to your divine guidance. Do so with willingness to truly follow. Try to be impartial. Try to consider the different options sincerely and to be sincere about following your guidance. And get still and quiet and tune in. Ask Spirit, what shall I do? Yogananda used to say, ask at the spiritual eye and then listen to your heart's feeling. Listen to the response that God gives you in your heart, not what your ego wants, not what you know, yippee, this is what I will, yay, that's what I was hoping you would say, God. Nah, you're probably being influenced by emotion, not by true spiritual guidance that is calm and impartial. And make sure to learn to rely on your inner self, your inner guidance, not too much on the external. And you will begin to tune into your guidance. Most important, have that willingness, and ultimately, you'll find yourself doing what you need to do, being at the right place at the right time. You can follow inner guidance. You will be guided.